Welcome back to the Malt Miller YouTube channel, Homebrewers. Today's video is part 3 of our collaboration with Burning Sky, following the visit that Martin and I made to their brewery just a few weeks ago.
James, following on from that awesome trip a couple of weeks ago, it's taken a little time to kind of really absorb the amount of information that Mark shared with us.
I know, Martin, it was absolutely amazing. I feel incredibly privileged to have been able to spend some time at a brewery that not many people really do get to go and spend time at. It's not like they've got a tap room or something like that. The key thing that we came away with was all of that amazing knowledge and confidence to really have a go at brewing styles of beer similar to that Mark and the team make at Burning Sky.
Yeah, and there was just so many little snippets of information to kind of pick those out of the videos which we've put together so far, to then also transfer those into a recipe that can hopefully emulate something very similar to what Burning Sky are putting out. But obviously we know what they do is very unique and very much handcrafted and hands-on.
So in this video, Martin and I are both going to be having a go at brewing one of the recipes each that Mark provided us. So Martin, which beer are you going to be having a go at brewing today?
So James, I'm going to have a go at Saison Huon, which, I've drunk a few cans of it since that trip because I've totally fallen in love with it.
And we're now stocking it as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful beer. So easy drinking, so delicate. It's not like a big, spicy, powerful Saison. I mean, if you're not a Saison fan, it's one of those beers I think that could convert you.
I'm going to be having a go at brewing my first ever mixed fermentation, and I'm going to be having a go at the recipe for Saison Provision that Mark provided to us, which, again, I feel a huge weight of responsibility towards trying to get it right, because it is the beer that really defined Burning Sky. And as Mark said, so many people have been so kind about it over the years. For me, walking away from the trip we made, I really had the confidence to have a go at brewing a beer that uses multiple different yeast strains. So it's going to be really interesting to see how these two beers turn out. So Martin, let's have a little bit of a closer look at the recipes that Mark's provided with us and that we're going to be brewing today in our attempt to clone these beers. First off then, do you want to start with your Saison Huon recipe? Talk us through the malt bill that you've got going on.
So malt-wise, it's crisp.
Okay,
yeah. So it's crisp lager malt and crisp pale wheat.
Nice, yeah.
Nice and simple. Hops then, where possible, we've used whole hops because that's what he likes to use in the kettle. And we've actually brought in Strisselspalt, which is a hop, the French hop that he uses, purely so that we can have this recipe and do it as best justice as possible.
Yeah.
And it's got a layering of hops. So you've got first wort hops, which is typically Magnum, which is what we're using in here. And then you've got Solea, and then you've got Strisselspalt going through the boil. And then you have also got some Whirlpool hops and then dry hops as well.
So what about within the Whirlpool and the dry hop, Martin? Which hops are being used?
So Whirlpool is Strisselspalt and Solea.
Yeah.
Now what I'd say about the Whirlpool is we've put on there a 25-minute Whirlpool at around about 85 degrees, which is typically the temperature that Mark's doing it at. Something really key to think about when you're trying to clone a brewery recipe. The time for them to transfer the volume from their larger kettle to their fermenter and the hop stand time will vary massively from a homebrew scale.
Yeah, because transferring 25 litres of wort from a grain father or from a kettle, into a fermenter, that could take minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas actually on those sort of scales, we're really extending those times.
Yeah.
And that increases the contact time with the hops, right?
Yeah, so I mean, we've given that with the recipe kit in terms of what their timings are. So it's your recipe. So you flex it and change it according to your system and how long you think that time should be. So it could be 25 minutes. You could extend it up to like 50 minutes if you wanted to.
Okay, nice. Okay. And then what about dry hop?
So dry hop then, it's SARS, Strisselspalt, Solea, and Centennial.
Nice, excellent.
Centennial BBC, by the way.
Yeah, I like that. Mark did mention about using Centennial, didn't he? Because it adds that slight lemoniness, which complements the yeast really well.
Now, the other real tricky thing, and I spent a lot of time talking to Mark about this after we did our recordings with him, is the yeast. Now, obviously, they've got a very unique, definitive house yeast,
Yep.
which has grown over 10 years of brewing.
Yeah, and especially the Saison strain, because they've got their 3 strains, and the Saison strain that they use for Saison Huon and actually their mixed fermentations as well. They treat it in a way that means that it's quite delicate and not overpowering in terms of flavour.
Yeah.
So how have you addressed that?
Right, so we've looked at a lot of the ones we've got out there. Today we're going to use the White Lab strain, because that's been around for quite a while. Did also edge towards Imperial, Napoleon, but also kind of like the look of Omega. All 4 of them are very similar, but also slightly different. So I think it's going to be a series of kind of brew it. Do you like it? How close we are? And then if we can always switch out for one of the other 4, because I'm pretty sure we're not going to do just one batch of this.
No, definitely not. It's such a wonderful beer.
Yeah. Right, James, talk to me about the Provision recipe, because obviously there's some challenges, but it might seem like a simple recipe.
Yeah, well, if we look at the grist first and foremost, it is quite a simple recipe. We've got crisp lager malt, again, as the backbone here. Now, this is a 30-litre recipe that we're brewing. So we're using over 6.5 kilos of base malt. And then it's just a little smattering of pale wheat malt, some spelt malt in there, a little bit of Caragold for colour, and just a touch of acidulated malt as well. Hop-wise, we're using 4 different hop varieties. So similar to you, we're using Solea. We're also using SARS. Sriracha Ace and East Kent Goldings. Now, East Kent Goldings, when used in a recipe such as this, just adds a lovely honey kind of floral note. So that should really, really come through in the finished beer. So where things start to get a little bit more complex in this brew is when we start to look at the yeast and actually the culture of yeasts that we're going to be using. So the same as you, our base yeast for this is the White Labs French Saison, okay? Again, it's the one that probably is most akin to the yeast strain that Burning Sky use. However, again, as Martin said, you can play around with that base yeast and, switch it out according to your trials and what works best for you. Now, we're also going to be using Brettanomyces strain, and we're going to be using the Saison Brettanomyces Blend 2 from White Labs. And then to round everything out and really give us that lovely, clean, lactic sourness that we want from this Saison, we're going to be using Lactobacillus brevis from White Labs as well, okay? And this combination of yeasts that we've selected are based on conversations we've had with Mark from Burning Sky and also from what we want to try and achieve from this. Look, you might want to have a play around with a particular blend of yeasts that you think will bring what you want from this mixed fermentation, and that's the joy of it. We are really playing with yeasts here to create a culture that is unique to us, rather than some of the other ingredients when we talk about brewing. Now, as I've said, the combination we've gone for is based on some conversations we've had with Mark and stuff that we feel will bring kind of a Burning Skyness to this. However, there are other options. For example, the bootleg strains. Now, Martin, you were mentioning one that you'd been looking at that could potentially do all 3 of these.
Yeah, so I reached out to Jeff at Bootleg and explained the project we were working on and the style and the flavours that you get from the beer. He said his Brett Saison strain would be great in there. But also, you could consider the Jester King strain he offers.
Yes.
But I mean, the difficulty with that is we don't get bootleg as often as White Labs. It's like almost like every couple of months, maybe once a quarter.
Now, one thing to note with this style of beer, and I'm sure that we'll be taking this approach, we're actually going to think about harvesting our yeast culture towards the end of our fermentation, right? So that you can reuse this. You can have another batch of wort ready to go in exactly the same way that Mark said when they've emptied their barrels and foeders, they want to get them filled as quickly as possible again. So we're really thinking about yeast as an investment here for maybe a few batches or creating a Solera system at home that means you've always got like this mother beer that you're going to be adding to and topping up. We've covered the recipes there for both of the beers that Martin and I are going to be brewing today. But actually where the magic happens with both of these beers is during fermentation. The yeasts really are the hero here. So Martin, what provisions are you going to be taking to ferment your beer?
James, the most important thing I've got to do is I've got to keep the yeast in check. Remember how Mark explained they're keeping the yeast below 22 degrees?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to basically use a stainless steel conical. I'm going to ferment it in there, keep it in check with the glycol chiller so it doesn't go above that 22 degrees, which will, keep away some of that spicier stuff which you get when you start going 24, 26, 28.
Yeah, and I guess using a stainless steel fermenter like that means you're going to be able to strip it down at the end and really take care of the fact that you're going to be using a Saison yeast that is diastaticus positive.
Yeah, you know, I'm not going to have to worry about any of the seals or anything like that. I will literally take them away, put them in a kettle, boil them. So James, yours is going to be a little bit more challenging. You've not just got a standard yeast, you've also got some bugs in there, you know?
Yeah, we've got some like non-standard yeast strains, right? So actually, something that is always said when we talk about taking the step into brewing mixed fermentation, have separate equipment. We could ferment it in a stainless steel fermenter, and we could strip it down and we could boil it afterwards in the same way that you're saying. But actually, I quite like the idea of having completely separate equipment and also potentially reserving some of that beer in there afterwards and topping it up. So having sort of a Solera system going. So we're going to be using a 33 litre plastic fermenter. I'm less worried about temperature control on this. We're venturing into autumn here, so the warehouse isn't going to be particularly warm at this time of year. And we're going to add all of our yeasts in at the same time. Okay. So all 3 yeast strains are going to go into the fermenter at the beginning. We're going to allow about 75% of fermentation to take place. And then we're going to introduce something special.
So James, what are you doing special?
Well, I love the idea of the oakiness being introduced, that subtle light oakiness that you get from Saison Provision. It's not dominant in the flavour profile at all, but what it does do is provide a home for the yeast culture as well. So we're going to be kind of doing a little bit of a experiment with this. Now, we have some awesome oak chips that we're going to be launching shortly that we've imported from France. Now, these are made from byproduct of the barrel production that takes place in France. So we have like clean, unused, untoasted French oak chips, which we're going to be introducing into the fermenter. But we're going to do something with them beforehand.
Well, they sound fantastic.
They are, and there will be some toasted options as well. But for this, we don't want toastiness. We want subtle oak on the flavour, and we want to create a breeding ground for our yeast to really take hold, okay? What we're going to be doing with this, though, is taking some inspiration from what Mark and the team do at Burning Sky. And that's using wine barrels that have been used ideally for the white wine industry, okay?
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. So some people say, you know, before you use oak chips, soak them in bourbon, soak them in vodka, whatever we're going to do, we're going to soak them in white wine.
I made a white wine the other week. I can give you some of that, and you can soak them actually in my wine.
Yeah.
And get that same effect.
I love that. I love that offer, Martin, and it would be such a nice holistic thing to do, using some homemade white wine to soak the oak chips in over the next couple of weeks ahead of introducing them to the fermenter when we hit that kind of 70-75% of fermentation. And hopefully what that will do is give us that that flavour profile that Mark and the team look for at Burning Sky.
You know, there are other options. I like the idea that you're going to use this plastic bucket. It kind of shows that, you know, you can start this at any level.
Yeah, and oak chips are an inexpensive way to get into this. But what were you thinking?
I've got hankering to use the oak barrels that we do. You know, we do them in different sizes, but 30 litre, you know, it's kind of why I made it a 30 litre recipe kit.
Yeah, I know, right?
So, but, you know, I think do the plastic bucket version first. Let's see how it turns out. And then we can look at, do we make that investment into an oak barrel?
Yeah.
Make a wine kit and put that into the oak barrel. Take the wine kit out, drink the wine, and then actually put some beer into it.
Well, yeah, and we could actually then use, you know, if this does work, we could add some more wort into our culture, let it ferment, then add that into the oak barrel once it gets to that sort of 70-75% of fermentation.
So that culture's then
embedded
within
the
into
oak.
the barrel. Yeah. Oh, I love the sound of that. This is going to be not just a kind of like 3 to 6 month project. It sounds like we're going to be on a bit of a repeat of this.
I really hope so, because this is an area of homebrewing that I've never ventured into before. What are you going to be using to brew your beer today, Martin?
So James, I'm kind of taking a little step away from what I normally use at home. I'm going back to using a G30.
Yeah.
You know, it's only a 23 litre batch.
Yeah.
But I've also got this new hop filter to check out. And
okay,
try.
yeah, you've been talking about this.
Yeah, so I can put the whole hops in there and let them just free flow, let them do their thing.
No worry about
Looking forward to it.
scorching on the element.
That's what I'm hoping.
Like that, or blocking when you're transferring. Cool, nice.
How about yourself?
I'm going for simplicity today. I'm using the Grainfather G40. We've got quite a lot going on in terms of getting ready for fermentation and, you know, getting all of the other bits and pieces we need together. So I'm using the G40 just because it's going to tell me what to do when I need to do it. It's reliable and I trust it.
And it'll do that nice big 30-litre batch you've got.
Exactly. There we go. We've both finished, right?
Yeah, what a great brew.
I know your work coming out of the, coming out of the kettle was absolutely fantastic. So clear and golden.
So impressed with that new Grainfather hop filter.
Yeah.
200 grams of whole leaf hops in there almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's come out beautiful.
I know, really, really impressive. So we haven't got your fermenter over here, but we have got mine because it's quite an exciting moment.
It's the exciting bit. Yeah, you know, we've
yeah.
never kind of really played around with mixed culture before.
No.
So
before we get on to pitching yeast, actually, you've got your little sample of white wine there that you brought in.
yeah, it does look a bit like a sample, but no, it's definitely wine.
Yeah, let's open that up for me.
Yeah, it's in one of, I kind of thought we'd stick it in one of our Kilner jars that we sell because, you know, they're great for just storing things for a long time.
Okay, so this is just the vanilla, it's called. So it's just kind of clean, unused.
Virgin oak.
Yeah, virgin oak. So we're going to add those in there. And you have to remember that a little goes a long way with this because there's a huge amount of contact area, all right? So we'll just give that a little swirl. Now I'm sure the wine will taste amazing as well after it's been sat in there for a couple of weeks, but we're just going to leave that for until this has hit that 75% or so of fermentation, and then we'll strain the wine off and add the oak chips in, all right?
Which of the yeast you're going to pitch in first?
Well, they're all going to go in together,
yeah.
But we'll start with the Saison strain, okay?
Nice. Let's give it a little shake up.
All right, do you want to do the honours?
I'll open them. You put them in if you want.
Okay.
It's your brew. You've done all the work. Wow, look at that.
I know. In goes that wonderful, wonderful Saison strain. It smells amazing as well.
That's the Brett. Wow, that smells funky.
That smells lush. There we go. And then last, but by no means least,
Lactobacillus. Ooh.
Yeah, that is
unique.
Very different. Okay, and it goes. Now, this is going to take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to really start to come into its own. We're obviously going to be doing little samples along the way to see how we get on. But I'm really excited to see how this turns out. How long is your Saison going to take to round out, Martin, do you think?
My guess, 7 to 10 days, maybe a little bit too short. So I'm going to kind of stretch it out to maybe 14.
Okay, right.
Now, I'm not here in 14 days.
No, you're not, are you? You're away gallivanting for a birthday that you've got coming up.
Yeah, I'm on holiday in a few weeks' time. So I'm going to need your help to kind of maybe possibly add the dry hops and then to kind of package the beer.
Yeah, really looking forward to that.
And I won't be here to taste it with you. So I've kind of thought I'd get someone else in to help you.
Okay, who have you got coming in to see how we've got on with the Saison Huon?
So Mark Tranter's going to come and pay a visit.
Okay, right.
That's the real test to see how close or how far away we are actually of cloning Saison Huon.
Fast forward then, it's been a few weeks since we brewed our version of the Burning Sky beers that we've just shown you, and we're joined with Mark today. So Mark, thank you so much for coming down.
Thanks for having us down.
It's wonderful to see you again, but also ever so slightly nerve-wracking that you're about to try the beers that we've made.
Yeah, I say it's nerve-wracking for me as well because they might be better than our ones. So
I doubt that very much, but you never know, right? And for eagle-eyed people out there, you might notice that Martin is here. So, Martin, how was your holiday?
It's fantastic, James. But I did make sure I had the beer ready so that I could get back in time and do the tasting with you.
Yeah, but you did bring us back some lovely merch from the West Coast of America, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to have you here with us to try this so that I'm not feeling as nervous just by myself.
So, guys, how did you find brewing the recipes that I gave you, both, on the brew day? How was the fermentation? And are you happy with how the one that's finished is and one that's progressing through its maturation?
Yeah, Martin, you go first. You brewed the houblon.
Yeah, I brewed the houblon. It's really nice recipe to brew. Quite simple, very easy to brew. I brewed it on a grain father, and then I fermented it in a grain father conical, which is a stainless steel conical. It's not pressurized. Held a maximum of 22.
Yeah.
For the fermentation. Cold crashed it. Yeah, I think it's looking and tasting pretty good.
Excellent. Looking forward to trying it.
Provision was a very similar experience for me on brew day, both of which are wonderful beers to brew because of the ingredients that go into them. They're quite sensory because you've got a variety of hops, some wonderful different malts. It was a joy to brew. In terms of fermentation, we're just over a month into the fermentation and maturation process. I've added the oak chips that we'd soaked in white wine to the fermenter as well.
Yeah, that's the white wine from my wine kit, wasn't it?
Yeah. And in my humble opinion, it's starting to taste
resemble.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We'll get you to try it in a minute, but for me, the Brett's really started to come through. There's a bit of pineapple kind of thing going on in there. And the lactobacillus is just starting to take hold as well. So yeah, quite
I like the idea that you've soaked the oak chips with white wine.
Yeah,
it's a nice touch.
Yeah, we really wanted to do as much as we could to make our first attempt at this as representative as possible of the work that you guys do down at the brewery.
Nice.
I guess the next step, James, is let's grab some beers, grab some glasses, and see how they taste again.
Yeah, let's do it.
This is the homebrew version.
Uh-huh.
This is Mark's version.
Okay, right. So we're gonna do this, yeah.
Compare and contrast.
Yeah.
We're not gonna get our boxing gloves on or anything like that for this.
Let's grab
maybe after a few.
Let's grab a glass each. Let's see how they look, how they smell, and then how they taste.
Yeah, sounds great. Right. Well, I'm not waiting around. So we've got homebrew in my right, your left.
Yeah.
Real thing here. Okay. So what do we think colour-wise?
Ours is slightly darker.
Yep.
Any thoughts on what might have caused that, Mark?
Probably if you're using like an electric heating element in the homebrew equipment, you'll still get some degree of caramelization. Whereas we got like steam jackets on our copper, so it's very efficient transfer of heat. So that might account for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have seen that before, haven't we, when we've tried to clone a beer.
It is marginal.
Yeah, I know.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. When you get them in the light as well.
Yeah.
They're both holding their head really well.
Yeah. And I think that's down to the leaf addition.
Yes. Yeah.
Leaf in the can.
This before, like, just leaf is great for head retention.
Yeah. Come on, I'm going to have a smell. So I've smelt ours recently whilst we've been packaging it. I've specifically not had any of the real thing for a week or two now.
Okay.
So
I had a can at the weekend, I have to confess. I can't stop drinking it. I'm getting more citrusy from Mark and more phenolics from ours.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah.
For me, I'm picking up the Centennial dry hop, the lemoniness on the aroma from yours more so than ours, and more Saison phenolic yeast presence.
Yeah. So I guess as time's gone by, like over the years, like I've preferred our Saisons to be cleaner tasting. So we ferment them at a lower temperature, and I know you fermented this quite low.
Yeah.
22.
22, so it's a different, but it's because it's a different yeast strain, it will exhibit different qualities.
Yep.
Yeah, ours is first generation from a commercial
Yeah.
yeast. Yeah.
So I'd maybe even ferment it a bit lower. And if you're worried about how high it's going to finish, like let it go through and do 50% of its fermentation where the phenolics are produced, and then ramp the temperature up.
Okay. Yeah.
To push it through.
So what, start around about 19 maybe?
Yeah, maybe run in at 19 and like hold it at 20 for the first half of fermentation if you want to do it again with this yeast strain.
Yeah. I personally love this yeast strain. I think it is wonderful, and there are similarities.
Yeah.
On the back end of the palate, I've just had a sip. The back end of the palate, there's a very similar presence for me from the yeast. But I'd be really excited to brew this again and do that, and keep that fermentation temperature even lower.
I think for a first go, it's really good. And like I said previously when you were with us, like the recipes are simple. It's in the execution.
Mm. Yours is so spritzy and lemony, like you say.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's close. I think I'd also look at maybe pressurized vessel, so we can keep a bit more control on it. Yeah,
that would help, and would go some way to emulate the volume that is created in one of your fermenters and the pressure.
Yeah, the hydrostatic pressure in our vessels is far greater.
Yeah.
So that will suppress some of the phenols as well. And if you're worried, you could always increase the dry hop slightly.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely something.
I mean, generally speaking, when you make bigger batches, you need to increase it rather than decrease it. But I think at this level, maybe just upping it by 10% or something.
Yeah. Well, there's some really practical steps for us to take away and try again. But they're both wonderful for me.
They're both really nice beers to drink. For me, though, the original,
is lovely.
The original, it wins for me.
Yeah. Drinking the original, don't actually drinking any of your beers, just takes me back to the time we spent together at your brewery, and the time we spent at the Evening Star. So coming close to that,
I would say big congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Should we have a go at tasting what the Provision's like out of the fermenter?
Yeah. Go for it.
Okay, here we are then, Mark.
Right.
So in the slightly less glamorous glassware is a sample straight out of our plastic fermenter of Provision. Now, this is only just over a month old, so it's got a long way to go, but I'd really appreciate your thoughts on how it is.
It'd be interesting to try, because I mean, ours takes between 3 and 6 months in oak.
Yes.
So.
As I said, the Saison yeast has done a lot of the work already. The breadth's there, and we're just starting to get the slight lactic note coming through. How are you finding it?
Yeah, I mean, for a month old, it's tasting and smelling kind of as you'd expect. There's a slight cheesiness on the nose, and you've got the yeast production going on, but there's definitely the acidity is starting to develop.
Yeah.
And that's going to round everything out, in the Brett. It's going to come through, it's going to round everything out. I mean, a couple more months and you'll start to have something really good to work with.
Yeah.
I'm tasting on the tip of my tongue that like a lot of fizzy kind of sherbetiness starting to build.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important for us that we don't have a particularly aggressive Brett or lactose strain. They're quite harmonious. And so, although there's a definite acidity to our beers, they're not too extreme.
Yeah, absolutely. Which makes them really enjoyable, able to kind of be drunk at any time, but also feels like a real treat.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm looking forward to seeing how this develops in a couple of
one
months.
thing I did pick up, and that may or may not be something, but when we're talking, fermented this in one go, it's been in the same vessel at the beginning.
Yeah.
One thing we do at the brewery is we do all the primary fermentation in about a week in stainless steel, and then we transfer it into a flat-bottomed fooder.
Yeah.
So we do that because fermenting in fooders is very messy, and also we do it for harvesting mixed culture. But it might be something where you're transferring off some of the yeast. There's still going to be a lot of yeast buoyant.
Yeah.
There's something we'll ferment this higher than the clean in Saisons, you know. But maybe we'd collect this at around 23, 24 and let it rise to 26. And then after a week, we'd take it down to 20 and then let the maturation happen in a separate vessel.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, that's something we could look at.
Yeah. Definitely, if we were going to do,
you could do another one. You're only a month behind.
Yeah.
Do another batch in a barrel. I mean, that was really what this was. This was like our first stab, our first test of it.
Like I said, I like the fact you've soaked the oak chips with white wine. I think that's giving a bit of the definite bit of the character.
Yeah. This really only means one thing, that we're going to have to get together again in at least 6 months' time to try how this turns out, right?
Yeah. A lot of the turbidity will just naturally drop out as the yeast do their work.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I feel far calmer now that you've tried both beers, but I've got another beer that I'd like you to try, okay? Which is something a bit special and been sent in by one of our customers. So just wait there. I'm going to go grab it, okay?
Nice.
Mark, I've got a beer here from one of our customers. His name's Brett.
Okay.
Brett Harmon from Harmon Brewing. He is a huge fan of yours and Burning Sky. Okay.
Nice.
Brett sent us a bottle of this beer a couple of weeks ago, just in conversation with him. He said, I'll send you a bottle of one of my mixed firms. And I messaged him earlier this week and said, actually, we've got Mark coming to us this week. Do you mind if I share the bottle that you sent us with him? He replied, oh, hell, which was a massive compliment, I think, for you, because he was really like, you know, but I managed to talk him around. He was happy for us to try his beer. It's called, here you go, Sandringham Saison. Now, the reason it's called Sandringham Saison is because he brewed it, I think it was the weekend of the Queen passing away. So it was his tribute to late Queen Elizabeth. It's based on your recipe for Provision that you'd previously shared in the Ewan Ferguson homebrewing book.
Yeah.
But he omitted the Sriracha Ace and has added 1.5 kilos of elderberry that were grown in his garden, 2.5 kilos of blackberries that were foraged on the South Downs, and I think 1.5 kilos of raspberries that he sourced from his local supermarket. So the yeasts that he used was Belle Saison from Lallemand, and then for the Brett and lacto side of things, he used Imperial Sour Batch yeast. Okay. And I'm really excited to try this because it looks wonderful, doesn't it? With that amount of fruit, you can see why.
Yeah, it's a large quantity.
Yeah,
that's like fizzy Vimto.
It does. Wow, the fruit aroma's off the chart. So was Brett rightly nervous, or?
It's pretty good.
He does live near you, so you might have to watch out for this stalking around the brewery.
There's lots of tart that's coming, but like nice. It's balanced with the fruit.
Yeah.
So the elderberries they're really earthy.
Yeah. We've
used elderberries as well. Used raspberries. I have used blackberries in the past, but not all together. There's some nice things coming through, and we actually use Provision as a base for a lot of our fruited beers because it's so giving. There's so much there, and I think what Brett's done is like really complimentary, as in huge compliments to him.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be absolutely thrilled to hear that. It's a wonderful beer, isn't it?
Very smashable.
And I think as he is such a fan of Burning Sky, as a compliment, as a testimony for his take on your beer styles, this is wonderfully representative.
Seeing what people are able to produce at home, then what you guys have been doing here, maybe we should. Well, how would you feel about running a competition on malt mellow to make like maybe a clean saison or a mixed fermentation saison, or even both?
I think it's a great idea.
I think that sounds like an absolutely awesome idea. I think that deserves a cheers.
Cheers.
Well, that about wraps things up for us today. Mark, thank you so much for coming to Malt Miller HQ and spending some time with us.
Thanks for having me down. Thanks for visiting Burning Sky in the first place and sharing your beers with us today, and Brett's beer.
I know, Brett's beer. Brett, it's an absolute joy. Thank you so much for sending that to us.
Yeah, well done.
I mean, Mark, I can't thank you enough. You've kind of given me another one of those ticks off the bucket list of my favourite breweries and getting to visit them. I don't know where we want to go next year. I don't know how we're going to go any higher than this, but thank you again for hosting us and for sharing those recipes.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed trying how you've interpreted them, and I'm very much looking forward to trying how your community interprets them.
Yeah, I mean,
if we get any entries.
Yeah, no, we'll sort out the competition rules and dates and get something out there on the socials, probably start December.
Absolutely. And that leads to a very poignant message. If you aren't already following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, whichever you choose to call it, make sure you are, because that's where we'll be sending out details about this competition with Mark and the team at Burning Sky. And also, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you check out the other ones in our Brew With Us series. I'll put a link on the screen now to those. And if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure you do. We've got a whole host of home brewing topics available for you. All that really remains for us to say is have a great brew. Cheers.
Cheers.